Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night, 7:10 p.m. Central. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. We're still alive. We've survived the Civil War. There's been no Civil War, but there's been some weird stuff going on for sure. So weird, it's just hard to even keep up with it anymore. I know some of the hot dates. The 20th, the inauguration, where that may be going to go crazy with some right-wing extremist terrorists and stuff like that. But we'll see what happens. Who knows what's going to happen? I hear there's an alien invasion coming.
Mm-hmm.
Been hearing that for 30 years. But I think it's already happened. We're just too stupid to know it, pretty much. But I was going to watch that WandaVision after the show, hopefully, with Christina. It's supposed to be a new Marvel show. It looks pretty weird. It's like black and white with an alien. I guess the guy's an alien vision. I don't know if he's an alien or what he is, but he's in Avengers and all that stuff. So we'll check it out. What have you been up to, Jay?
Oh, it's about the same thing, just catching up on shows and stuff. And I've been waiting for this WandaVision too. And I think I agree with you. It looks weird because they show them like in the 50s and then there's a 70s version and they change costumes. I have a feeling it's going to be, we're going to find, the Mojo guy from the alternate X-Men universe that has his world as a television show. So I think that's going to be the tie-in, but we'll have to wait and see.
That's what they were saying. It's like a couple in suburbia, but things aren't what they seem or whatever.
Yeah.
So we'll check it out. I saw the trailer for Loki on there. I'm really looking forward to that. That looks really good. That's going to be good. Loki. His own show, baby.
Like good
Trickster, baby. That's right. What was that show where he's a vampire movie? Oh, I saw the thing. I'd have to look it up. But it's I forgot the guy. The guy did Dead Man, and now I can't remember. Only Lovers Left Alive. Yeah, he was a vampire in that with Tilda Swinton. The kind of I don't know if it's the guy usually does indie movies and stuff. He did a movie recently, Jim Jarmusch. He did The Dead Don't Die with Bill Murray and zombies, and it's funny. It's pretty good. Adam Driver. You can get into some weird movies. Look him up on IMDb. He has a lot of weird stuff. Has some old Steve Buscemi stuff. Well, tonight's guest, Rob Gauthier. How you doing, Rob? And did I pronounce your name correctly? Gauthier. I'm from Georgia, so
yeah, that's perfect. Everybody I've heard who said my last name says it differently. French Canadians, Michiganders, Louisiana, all over the country. I say Gauthier, but that's just because we Americanized a French name. My family did way back, so that's how I go. But I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here tonight, guys. It's wonderful to hang out with you guys and spend some time here.
Good to have you here, and definitely been looking forward to it for sure. And I guess give us a little bit of background about yourself. I know everybody can go to the site and read the full version, but I'm kind of curious what the catharsis was to get you into the extraterrestrials, so to speak. What was the catalyst that got you into all this?
Well, extraterrestrials themselves, UFO phenomenons, ghosts, Bigfoot. All of those were kind of grounded in my childhood experience. I grew up in Michigan. One of the first things that had my friend, who I grew up with, still one of my best friends, we grew up together since we were 4. When he was about 6 or 7, he told his mom while they were driving down the road, I just saw a walking monkey run across the road. And they're living way out of town, 10 miles from town. And at that time, it was a rarely developed town. There was like 400 people there. So within a 40-mile radius of this part in southwest Michigan, there was nothing but forest. So, his mom's like, oh, that's nice, sweetie, and just didn't look and just kept driving. So eventually there came a time where through his property out on their house out in the country, there were some large footsteps, and we thought it could have been his brother. His brother was older, but we took his shoe out because it looked so much bigger than anybody's foot that lived in the house. And it was huge. So all of a sudden it sent us on a search. We went to the library, and my friend found a Bigfoot book, and he said, this is it. So we ended up seeing these footprints randomly for the next couple of years as we were trying to figure it all out. And as you know, as a kid, growing up in the 80s, maybe some of you guys don't know who are listening, no internet. So we had to go to the library, and it was a very specialized field, and the place we lived was very small. Very limited books. So we would find some of the more mainstream books, like the show that they used to do, the Unsolved Mysteries. And that sent us down the whole thing, you know, ghosts, UFOs, things like that. We actually ended up finding a tuft of hair one time that was next to a tree by this gigantic footprint that we found, and it smelled really bad. You know, we weren't sure if it was a dog who might be loose or something, but you know, we're using our imagination, so we're like, this might be Bigfoot hair, you know, and there was nothing to be done about it back then. You know, we couldn't take it to the local school, the high school, where people would be like, yeah, you're crazy, just get out of here. So it just was what it was, you know, it kept us wondering. I did have some dreams where I'd start going to bed, and I talked to this woman, and this woman said that she was related to me, that she was my grandmother, my great-grandmother, my mother's grandmother. And I had talked to her for a while, and she told me some things about my mom that I had no clue of knowing, you know, no way of knowing. Parts of my life my mom didn't really talk about. I confronted my mom the next day, and I said, I think I had a dream, you know, it felt very real, like I was talking to someone. She said she was your grandma, and I told her the things that she had said. And my mom was just, you know, she was shocked because there was no way for me to know about that. And she's like, well, you must have heard that somewhere. Me and my sisters are talking on the phone or something, and dismissed it. It was probably just a dream, you know. That was kind of my whole experience as a kid. I saw a couple questionable things in the sky. I couldn't really say it was a UFO or not, but moving very erratically, very different from what, you know, planes or satellites or anything else would fly. You know, zigzagging through the sky, very high up with bright red lights that flash. So I thought I knew what it was, but I had no idea if I knew what it was or not. Then finally, when I was about 13 or 14, I was driving out with my friends out in the country, and all of a sudden I saw a UFO, and that was the closest sighting that I'd ever seen. Still to this day, a better one than any I've seen. It was very low. It was a couple 100 feet above the ground, and probably maybe a quarter mile to half mile out. Very bright, very detailed. You could tell it looked like, not like an actual saucer, but kind of a rounded side to the middle and then a dome on the top. And it was very sharp edged, like almost certain parts of it looked like it was triangular on the edges. So I thought that, you know, maybe I'd gone crazy. We were smoking pot then too, so I said maybe someone laced the weed with something. So, you know, it was what it was. I thought about it a lot. I looked around a lot, but as I got older, I got into a lot of trouble. You know, eventually my son came. My son has some physical problems from a birth injury, caused brain damage, so he has cerebral palsy. And I had him when I was 19, so my whole life became dedicated just to him until I figured out the scope of his thing. So, and I'm trying to make a long story short, but it's quite a bit of things involved. Yeah. So as it comes down, I'm trying to deal with the thing that he has, the cerebral palsy, and all of his problems that come with it. Emotionally and mentally dealing with the fact that, you know, he'll never be able to walk or talk or have children or do all these things that when you first have a kid, you imagine they might be able to do. And as a 19-year-old kid turning 20 or so, you know, it kind of got to me pretty heavily. So anyway, we pushed forward another year. So I got into a car accident. I ended up having to take pain medicine. And with that, it started an addiction. And this addiction lasted for 8 or 9 years. But it was more than just pain pills. After the doctors cut me off, I ended up going to the streets to get harder drugs, Oxycontin, morphine, which ended up turning into heroin, which when you go to the streets to buy drugs, you're not just around one drug, you're around all of them. So cocaine, the whole thing. And it snowballed for 9 years. And basically, everything I knew and loved kind of just disappeared out of my life except for my son and my relationship with drugs and addiction. My son always being the top priority. It was weird for me as I was a drug addict whose mindset, morals, all were switched out and changed. The one thing I still cared about and took serious was my son. So anyway, I knew it was time to stop. It had devastated pretty much my whole life, financially, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And I started coming out of that. And then I started doing meditations. I wanted to go back into that truth of what's out there, what's bigger than me, what is God, why are we here? Those things started mattering again, because 9 years, nothing mattered to me but my son and my drugs, and that was it. That took me into meditations. Meditations took me into like an astral projected state, and that's where I ended up meeting an entity that you can only say is an astral projected form. That's when I started connecting with him. His name's Treb, that's what we call him. And as I connected with him, the more I connected with him, the more I was able to learn about myself, the more I was able to learn a lot of other things. And that's what got me into ETs and channeling and connecting to extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional consciousness. So since then, I've been connected with him for well over 12, 13 years at this point. And in astral projected states, I've seen a lot of different entities connected with a lot of different beings, different planetary consciousnesses, different spaceships in astral state, but also in the physical body when I'm awake. Me and my wife have seen dozens of UFOs, definite UFOs, a lot of questionable ones. Obviously, when you're looking at the sky, you'll always see something that's odd or weird. But it's also brought the ability for me and other people when we go to events and then we'd meet up at night, we'd all see UFOs together. Me and this guy from England who travels to the US each year for our events that we do, our conferences, me and him were sitting outside of my wife's sister's house, and we saw 4 or 5 UFOs in one night. We meditate, we get our energy where we're trying to call into them and connect with them. And then we see tons of UFOs. My wife saw several on her own with this guy from England. He saw a bunch with me, and we saw a bunch as a group. So it's like that a lot now. Now, since I've started channeling and connecting with this ET in an astral state, that's the experience you get. We have UFO sightings all the time now. It's pretty common occurrence. Like last year, I wasn't out and about as much. Since we've had our new baby, our daughter, she's 1.5 years. So for the last couple of years, I've not been out and about. Thank you. I appreciate that. She's wonderful. It's been a really great experience. 20 years between kids is a little weird, but it's been great.
Well, one thing I can understand is, I've never had I have a daughter, but she's in pretty decent health. She just turned 12, but I understand how suffering from having cancer when I was 17 and how you could, going through that with your son, it opens us up, our consciousness on so many levels. And on some level, it attracts these things for some reason. Because my story, just to, I want to ask you about some of the beings I've seen, just to try to get some of your knowledge, so maybe I can learn more about what they are, who they are. But one thing, when I was 17, I was having pain down below in the nether regions in school. And I went to a doctor, and they said it was from having too much sex. I was a virgin. I was like, I'm a virgin, dude. I'm sorry to, get rid of your fantasy or whatever I wish. But anyway, they had to do exploratory surgery. And I woke up to find out, I lost one, and I had cancer that spread to my stomach and lungs. And I just cried. I couldn't, I was 17. I didn't even know this kind of stuff really. I mean, I'd heard of cancer, I'm sure, but I didn't think it would ever happen to me. But anywho, during that time, I found God, the universe. I said a prayer. I was in the comic books and stuff, and I said a prayer to be a superhero, to be healed, to find true love. And I was in so much pain from that chemo. It was just crazy. There was one time I was going to shoot myself, but I heard that Nirvana Lithium song, and I couldn't do it. And I like a little fanboy, I wrote Nirvana. I'd never wrote a band before. They never wrote back. But then, years later, he shot himself. I was like, well, that's weird. But I had a lot of, suffering. And it seems like when we go through these things, it does open us up on a lot of levels. And then I was healed. I'm fine now. And I've also experimented with drugs and gone through an addiction like you have on some level. Now I'm just pot and kratom and herbal stuff. I don't do anything crazy. It's been a while since I've done anything hard. If I did it now, I'd probably be in the ER, some of that stuff. But the point is, I was healed, and then my dad died like a year or so later, and my dad always told me if I did drugs, he'd shoot me, and he was crazy, so I never did drugs. But when he died, I became little Scarface of Georgia. Like I was doing everything, selling, doing crazy stuff. I almost got caught with a bunch, and it scared me so much that I quit doing it because it was like God protected me from going to jail. There was speed in the house. A police car came out to get me. It fell in a ditch. They had to get another one to come and get me. It was like something was protecting me. They didn't find it. And I was like, that's a miracle. And I quit. I probably would have did 10 years or some crazy thing. And God knows what would have happened. But during that time, I started having a lot of experiences, seeing weird stuff. Things over the house with witnesses and friends going, you're attracting these here, from energy type spears and strange things from blue, red to gold. Some other weird craft like pyramid type craft, which could be governmental, military, weird stuff. I don't know. I know there's all kinds of theories on those pyramid craft. But one of the big things that you never forget is when you actually see these beings with your physical eyes. And I've seen them messed up before, of course, but I've also seen them completely sober. And one of the big things that I've seen a lot completely sober are beings of light, people made of light. Like I've seen one fly through the sky like Superman and completely sober. I've seen two leave my house down here in Florida. So I was inside and I went outside. And I think I'd been playing the Bible on DVD, on TV or something, like something weird, dude. You know, I've studied all kinds of different religions, but Christianity's always been in my life on some level. And I study Norse stuff and shamanism a lot and different things. But the point is, I went outside and turned towards the house, and I saw two beings of light fly into the heavens as if they came out of my house and came through the roof somehow, however they passed through stuff, I don't know, but they did, and just fly straight into the heavens. And I've seen those beings of light many, many times, and then there's some other ones I've seen. But I guess my first question is, I've heard everything about the beings of light from ET to deceased loved ones to, you know, luminous beings of light from shamanism, but I'm kind of curious to get into your brain on what those kind of beings may be. What have you had experiences with beings of light that kind of, you know, glowing, and what do you think they may be?
Well, the beings of light are a little tricky because they can be a lot of different things. Normally, the way that dimensionality works, from everything that I've learned from Treb and Art, which are the two entities that I've channeled most and the ones I've become closest with, communicated with, they explain it like this. Dimensionality is multiple levels of physical layers that sit in the same time space as one another. So on Earth, there are the humans that we are, which is in the fourth dimension, or third density, as they call it. Density being a spiritual or soul evolution, but also composed of dimensionality. And then you have fourth density beings who are here. And physically, you can't see them with your eyes. They can be right next to you, never know. Then there are deceased humans who live between the dimensions, between the fourth and fifth dimension. So maybe, you know, a human has passed on and they've been out of physical reality or their body for, 100 years, and they've developed quite a bit of their own soul understanding, amounts of consciousness back. And then, you have the fourth to fifth density, or fourth dimensional beings to the fifth dimensional beings. And sometimes when we ourselves are open to the experience and open the third eye part of ourselves, the same thing that happens when you're taking DMT or hallucinogenic drugs, you open up that pineal gland, the molecular structures of that pineal gland come into the brain and open up that ability to see into that dimension higher. And sometimes it takes us a little higher between where the deceased humans are, and sometimes it takes us to the next dimensional. And it's not that our bodies are there, it's just our ability to see it with our inner eye is there. So sometimes these beings of light are higher dimensional beings, and sometimes they're from Earth, sometimes they're extraterrestrial, but we always call those extra dimensional beings. And extra dimensional beings can also be the deceased humans between the layers, and it's much easier for them to access this dimension of reality because they're already very close to that. They're only out of their body for whatever amount of time, a year to 100 years, they're still much lower in the dimensional shifting space. So they have to use these tricks, and there's tricks to be seen and felt and heard in this dimension. So you know how some people, when they describe being around deceased humans or spirits or any entity of any sort, they say that they feel cold and chills. Well, that's because in order to bring their own energy into this dimension to communicate with us or to be around us, they have to use the energies in our own dimension. So what would you use in order to bring your energy down? You could use heat. And if you're using the heat molecules and the actual ultraviolet rays that are around, then it would be cold, or you would be seen as a shadow. If you're taking the actual UV light, ultraviolet light that's around, then it would appear as shadow. And then you have other entities that appear as white. And basically they're taking components of the opposite ray of spectrum of light out of the energetic field in the lower dimension in order to perceive. Now, higher consciousness beings from higher dimensions, beings like extraterrestrials that might live in a fifth dimension, they have a lot more consciousness than humans do. And the way you describe it would be, as a human being, we're lucky to have 20% of our total consciousness inside our body at any given time. When people pray or meditate, they kind of connect to a higher part of their own selves. They connect to a different understanding or a different level. You can do that with weed, kratom. You can do it with a lot of herbal, ayahuascas, even though that's higher dimensional comparatively, it still accesses the higher parts of your own consciousness. That's how I was able to connect with Treb, through meditation, astral projection. These beings are able to divide consciousness because they have way more than we do. And some of them can project actual avatars into our own dimension, or even if they're really advanced, they can actually create physical bodies in our dimension and then project some of their consciousness in it. And this is why we've heard of ETs in our history. Gods from the skies come down. They describe them as blue skin. They describe them as avian. They describe them all sorts of these different types of beings. And they're projecting their consciousness into a physical body and are able to walk around that body. And the body is just as real as mine or yours. And that's a lot of time people see the physical bodies of it. But the light is usually beings who projecting large amounts of consciousness into. And the difference in the dimensionality is this. We're very dense as a dimension. We're the lowest dimension that there is possible in physical evolution of consciousness as we go. You die, you reincarnate, you come back, you do it lots and lots of times, and eventually through linear time perspective, you go into the next dimension and start from there. So these beings have been able to project enough of their consciousness into our dimension, and having the difference in density of dimensions itself, what's our highest level of vibrational physical energy in our dimension is light. So the lowest level of theirs is higher than what our dimension of light would be, or our vibration. Light is the least physical thing in our reality. It travels at the speed of light. You can't catch it and put it in a bag. It's very, very less dense than all the physical rocks in our skin and bodies. So their dimension starts after our physical vibration of light would. So that's why you see light coming out of them when they're projecting into our reality, because it's the lowest thing that they can use to connect their dimension to ours and then project their own physicality through that, if that makes sense.
Yes, definitely, for sure. Definitely appreciate it. Definitely giving me new views on it, no doubt about it. The way you break it down, it's complex for sure. Well, yeah, that's what I think. Either deceased loved ones, or who knows? It may be weird aliens. I don't know, but I kind of wonder. I always bring up that Ron Howard Cocoon movie because it seems like Opie was tripping when he made that one, with all the old people in the swimming pool and the cocoons in the pool. I don't know if you've ever seen those with Steve Guttenberg and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's been a while. I think I've seen them back when they came out in the late 80s, early 90s.
Watch them again sometime. I found they're hard to get on DVD for some weird ass reason. I finally found a copy of them, and me and my fiance watched them. Definitely check them out again. It's definitely weird stuff, but good. But one more encounter, and then I want to switch over and give Jay some time and then switch back. But there was another time I was in Georgia, and we were in the back of my home, and I was with my friend Brian. We were partying and probably been up all night and doing, some kind of rave stuff or something weird, X or something. I don't remember. But we saw some hooded beings, like three, in the woods together, and we both were like, "Do you see that?" "Yeah, I see it." "Do you?" So we both see this, making sure we both were seeing this. And it was three small cloaked beings, and they didn't look like Jawas, but that's kind of what comes up when you think about them for some reason, Jawas. But they had a black box. That's what it was, some kind of black box on the ground, and they were standing three, and then the black box. And we were watching them, and there was a cat I had named Manson. I named him after Marilyn Manson. I was into all that stuff back then. Not so much now, it's okay, but back then a little bit more. But he went and jumped at them, and they vanished. And we both saw it. Later, I found that cat passed away, but I don't know if they did it. It was a car, I think, got it somehow or something. And I'm not going to blame them on it because I don't really know. But for some reason, when that cat saw them too and jumped towards them, and they vanished. But I've always been kind of curious to what they may be, possibly. I know that I don't know how you feel about Greer. I don't even really know how I feel about him. I know there's a lot of opinions about him, but I know he was shuffling around that little alien mummy thing or whatever. I was like, is that what was in those little cloaks? I don't know, but that's kind of rung a bell with me. I don't know what they are, but any clue what smaller like type hooded beings may be? And then also always try to figure out what the black thing was, the black box.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to this, you said you were probably coming back from rape, so that means you were probably taking ecstasy, I'd imagine.
Yeah, possibly. There's definitely some of that going on. For sure.
Okay. So, well, it's like, DMT. It's like the other stuff. It brings you into that different dimensional third eye, being able to focus and into that reality, or at least peeking into it. So as dumb as it sounds, and it was even after meeting extra dimensional being in an astral state, it sounded dumb to me when I first heard it. But all these fairy tales, legends that you hear about, dragons and dwarfs and elves and all these things have a root in actual human, or not human, but actual earth beings in a higher dimensional energy. When you hear of elves and gnomes and things like that, there are actually beings that exist in that higher dimension on Earth that still live and still exist here, just in that higher dimensional form. So they had all already went through the evolution of their own consciousness, their own incarnation cycles, and they're existing in that higher plane. And a lot of people who take ayahuasca or mushrooms, they talk about these cog elves, for lack of a better thing to call them, I guess. And what they're talking about are small entities that are higher dimensional that work with mechanical technology. And the technology, which I imagine is probably what the black box is a lot of different things it could be. Some people have described these cog gnomes or cog elves to be basically higher dimensional beings who are using technology to manipulate reality around them. And I don't know, I've never met one. When I've talked to Trevor Ardiff about it, they've always told me and shared with me that they exist and that they do use technology. But in that higher dimension, manipulating physical reality is part of the consciousness that you use. Like when you go from this dimension to the next, time isn't linear or as linear as it is here. It's more fluid. People can experience recovering from an injury before they're injured, which also sounds strange, but linear time is tied to our own dimension, and time-space is kind of all one fabric. And the less you become physical, the less fabric there is, and the more malleable that fabric is. So I'm thinking that's probably what it was. Unfortunately, like I said, if I ever come back to the show, I'll be able to channel. Tonight I have obligation to channel, and I can only do it a couple times a day. But I would also like to hear the answer to that, to see if what I understand it is. Treb and Ardif, when I channel, they're definitely tied into person's energy much much better than I am. People say, "You channeling, that's psychic, right?" I'm like, well, I have intuition and I have understanding, but that, I'm not a psychic by any means. But, well, I guess everybody is to some level or something. But yeah, that's probably my best bet on what it is. I'm not sure about the cat. What happened to the cat, but I do know animals because they're tied into their instinctual selves instead of like humans who are more investigative and who focus on their sense of self and the sense of time as far as linear perspective, and animals being tied more to instinct in the moment. I think that they're able to see into that realm a lot better than humans. Treb always told me dogs, cats, the animals that have higher consciousness for animals, which are second density, even though they exist on our dimension, they're one lower level of soul evolution, but they still have more contact with the earth itself. And that's part of why humans aren't psychic like they used to be when humans were first coming through their evolution, because we're disconnected from the earth itself as a part of our own energy. When you're in sync with your environment, you're able to feel it, understand it, and know it better. And because we've been so out of tune with our environment, it kind of shuts down those things in us a lot more, and you really have to work to get it back.
Definitely. And as we were talking, Jay's black cat came and sat behind his head, so that was pretty funny.
Yeah, I saw.
Yeah, on cam. All right. Well, let's get Jay a few questions in here, and I appreciate it. And I'll still be here, but go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, I got a couple of great questions for you. We'll get to those in a second, but let's go back to the animal thing. I can't remember the guy's name now. He was a weatherman at Groom Lake in Area 51 in Nevada, and during his 2 or 3 years there, he encountered, I think he called them Arcturians, the tall, blue, whitish aliens. They might have been the Pleiadians. I don't remember exactly, but he was talking about, from what he heard from them, as far as the lower animals go, and those aliens said to him that they were impressed with us because they considered us higher beings, lower than them, but higher than cats and dogs and what have you. And they were impressed that we had them as pets. We corralled them as food animals. We tamed them as animal pets for our children and ourselves, and that we didn't just wipe them out off the planet, because these beings said that the other higher planets they'd gone to, the aliens there of a higher, I guess, elevation than us, found no use for those animals and just wiped them out. And I was wondering, have you heard anything about that in your channels? That you find out that there's other planets with higher beings that have destroyed all the animals on their planet because they have no physical or emotional use for them?
Yeah, that's very interesting. It's the first time I've heard it, but there are both Pleiadians and Arcturians that have certain races that are like a blue, pale skin, and actually the term Pleiadian and Arcturian both are kind of blanket terms, I call them, because the Pleiades encompasses several dozens of stars within a system and lots of planets and lots of dimensions. So there's literally dozens, if not hundreds, of races that are there. Arcturus the same way, multiple planets, multiple dimensions. So there's lots of races from there too. But no, I've not heard that specifically, but I have heard, as far as the spectrum of consciousness goes, that humans are at a very unique level. A lot of ET races are interested in us, and it's because of our own, spectrum of consciousness. When they go to other planets that are also in the third density range of their evolution, like we are now, we're going from third to fourth density, towards the end of our third density. But no matter what part of third density they go, when they meet with other races, there's some that are highly benevolent and highly connected to their environment. Their psychic abilities are very strong. They're very in tune with their nature. So I imagine those races probably wouldn't want to kill too many of their own animals that live there, as, coinciding and being at one with their energy. And there's also the spectrum of highly malevolent, where there's always wars, fighting, territorial. A lot of that gets tied to reptilian energy and people's perspective of the bad reptilian, even though that's not accurate either. But so there's these things, and the spectrum is pretty wide. Humans are kind of special with how many ETs watch us and observe us, because we have a broad spectrum in one Earth environment. So yeah, we have different versions of humans. They never call it a different race, because someone who's European and someone who's Hispanic and someone who's black, we're all humans. So they consider us the human race, but we have different species of our race. So they see this as fascinating too, because not a lot of planets do that. A lot of planets have 1, 2, or 3 races maybe, while Earth has so many different kinds. But we also have the capacity as one individual human to go out during the day and to murder people. You know, you can go out cold blood, mafia assassin, just shoot people without feeling anything about it, and be so disconnected from yourself and your soul and the sense of love that you have. And then you can go home that night with the deepest sense of love in your heart, hug your kid and tuck them into bed and love them, like unlike any love that you could feel. So humans are very rare, because all of us have that whole spectrum of that inside of us. And I know that's why they really, are curious about us and watch over us a lot. But I have not heard that part of the of race. I'm sure there are many races that wipe out other entities or beings that are lesser evolved in their own. But I think most, from what I've heard, we're about 30% towards the malevolent spectrum overall, even though our spectrum as a race is quite large. So I would assume there would probably be more of the opposite of that. There's probably more races that tend to love and care for their trees, plants, and animals on their planet than what we do. But again, that's from Treb and Ardif, and they've been around the galaxy quite a bit. But I know some races come from other galaxies, and the beautiful thing about that is that when you're going from galaxy to galaxy, just like when you're going to planet or part of a planet, country to country, there's different themes involved with why you would want to live that life or experience that life. So in our galaxy, there's a whole separate theme than the Andromedan, even though we're very close. And then galaxies, billions of light years out, they're way, way, way different in their whole ecology. Even if you're talking about, multiple trillions of races in one galaxy, still the theme of that galaxy would be different. So I'm sure that there are other galaxies where things happen and are experienced that we wouldn't even be able to comprehend as a possibility in ours, just because the difference of theme that's there is different.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that about the multiple trillions of aliens and species and races that could be out there. I think it was Stephen Hawking that said it, that he said that there's possibilities of alien life in the universe that if we encountered it, we might not recognize it as a life form. And I think that's true on a couple of levels. And my main way I connected to that statement was Earth. The planet Earth is an entity. It's a living entity. It may not be a conscious entity, but it has life on it, and it creates its own magnetic atmosphere to keep itself from being burnt up by the sun and so on like that. So I kind of feel that that's what he was talking about, but there's got to be, and I'm pretty sure that it'll never happen in our lifetime, but at some point we're going to find an alien life form out there that is so, to use the word alien to us, that at first glance it wouldn't register on any of our instruments or in our brains as a living creature or entity. And I've been saying this for years as well. I don't know how much of a Star Trek fan you are, but there's an episode of The Next Generation called The Tin Man, where this Betazoid psychopath gets on the Enterprise, and they take him to this star near the Romulan Empire that has a living creature that is near this sun that's about to explode. And when they get there, they find out this living creature lives and dies and breeds in space, in the vacuum of space. It's a vacuum creature, but on the inside of it, it's laid out like a spaceship. And something happened to its crew, and all the crew died, and the spaceship being was depressed and was just going to kill itself by letting the sun explode and take him out with it. And since then, I was like, yeah, interesting idea. There's must be. We know for a fact that lots of microorganisms live in space. So we got plankton on the space station. We've taken up, those little, I think they call them water cows, or microscopic little creatures in the water that look like cows that move. They've taken all kinds of microorganisms out to the space station and in the space shuttle, exposed them to the vacuum and radiation of space, and brought them back to Earth, and they survived. So microorganisms can survive out there. There must be some macroorganisms that can live and operate in space that are not mechanical beings. They're not mechanical manufacturers. Have you heard anything of like that kind of a creature that actually lives in outer space, lives, breathes, dies in space?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The two things I want to touch about. I haven't seen that episode. I've seen many Star Trek episodes. My dad used to love them, so I'd watch them with him sometimes. But the ship being a ship, that's itself, it's interesting because the higher dimensional beings that are further along in their evolution, when you're going towards 5th and 6th density, these beings integrate their own consciousness with the technology. So they're using their own consciousness to build, like we would, we're using our mind, our soul, and our heart to create, a computer. The first person who built a computer had to put all of himself into it. Yeah. So there's that aspect of it, but the actual integration of consciousness. So when you're sitting in the seat, you think a thought, and your technology would take you to that place. Well, when you have large crews and large amounts of beings on these ships, and they're all putting their consciousness into it, the ship itself does hold a consciousness, and it's a collective form of parts of each one of those beings. So it has its own thoughts and its own feelings and its own connections. So that's I think a lot of these things that are in science fiction are actually being channeled, but it's unknowing to the writer, or maybe it is known to them, but they don't want to sound crazy like I do. So they just write it down as fiction and sell it up, because a lot of things I've seen after I've learned what I've learned from these beings has been amazing. Now, entities in the vacuum of space, absolutely, there are a lot of them. There are beings even outside of Earth atmosphere that had been captured. And a lot of the things that we see on YouTube, in my opinion, a lot of the things that we see with these beings that are flying in the upper atmosphere, a lot of that's CG, a lot of it's faked. But there are beings, I think Treb called them space worms, for lack of a better term, but these are like 50, 60-foot things that are floating out in space, and they go to planet, and they exist. Even in the upper atmosphere where nothing should be able to live. In Venus, there's microbial, how we would understand as microbial life that exists there. And I think, he said that 10, 12 years ago when I first met him, that there was second density beings on Venus, as well as Mars, and humans are just starting to find this stuff out. So that exists, but there are entities that have the ability to be in the vacuum of space and survive and live there, that are even more complex, like bipedal beings. And there's a lot of entities in this galaxy that I've been able to see and not be able to meet directly the same way I'd meet Treb. Some of them were just projections, like they would show me psychically what they're talking about, because I would be asking the same things. These entities, there's got to be life that's out there that we wouldn't know. There's one specific race that was very interesting, and basically they were the same as humans. They're third density consciousness, but they're not bipedal, and that's unusual. Bipedal is an archetype of that consciousness builds when it goes from non-physical to physical. The soul wants to experience, so it lives in a body and experiences through that, which is the way all the things manifest. But this being was like gelatinous. It looked like a pile of goo, basically.
Oh, wow.
And it has a gigantic dome-like top of it, which is where it's sensory, and it can't see and can't hear. It doesn't have those types, but it feels vibrations, and it also has a psychic energy to it. So it's able to perceive the energy around them, and they're able to move very slowly, like it would take them days to move just a couple of feet, but that's how they live their life. They live hundreds of years, and they just cruise around their planet, meeting each other, connecting with each other, creating new versions of themselves, like amoebas. They just kind of connect up, and what's left afterwards is the new being, and that's how they reproduce, and they go around their planet psychically calling out to each other. and then go meet one another. That's their social structure, their whole thing. So there's tons of beings like that in our universe. Now I go back to the thing too that you said about planet Earth being alive. Very much, I believe that too. Everything that Treb's told me about planets as a consciousness, even Mercury, the dead planets, they still have a form of consciousness. Before, like very, very early in the solar system's experience, when Mercury was a bit further out, it was able to hold life. And that life that exists on the planet itself has to come from somewhere. And I know this gets into a spiritual aspect also of how I understand life to experience. Some people see God, some people see oneness as God. So if you think about all things that exist in this universe and you take out linear time, so from the very start of our universe, generically humans think of it as a Big Bang, and then the decay of the universe through expansion, everything that's ever lived there, everything that's ever existed, even things that we don't see as living, rock, water, fire, all the way to the highest dimensional beings, if you put all their souls together into one gigantic soul, that would be the entire universal consciousness from the start of the universe to the end of it. And that's how planets work too, as far as consciousness and the physicality of it. Every being that's existed from the little pebbles of rocks and ice that started Earth, and when it starts coalescing with other rocks and building up on itself gravitationally, becomes an orb, and then all the way through the very spark of the first single organism life, all the way to when the Earth burns up and is destroyed, swallowed by the sun. That whole time, every soul, every piece of consciousness, if you put them together, it would be the consciousness of the Earth itself. And that's why when I talk about consciousness, I usually use the word fractalize or fractalization. Obviously, Treb and Art have shared that with me. And what that means is the Earth itself, being that one consciousness, would fractalize into different parts. You have different humans that exist from the beginning of humans. You have the dinosaurs. You have life before the dinosaurs. And they've shared that third density life, bipedal humanoid life, has existed on Earth several times before humans did. And it's a cycle. And that cycle goes, and they either die out or they reach to the next dimensional level. And eventually they would leave Earth to start a new experience somewhere else. So humans are like the fourth or fifth iteration of bipedal third density life. And the very first beings were called the Conki, and they existed as an aquatic form of life. The oceans were different, the atmosphere. What drove them to leave Earth was the changing of atmosphere for the oxygenization, pardon me, my tongue's tied. The oxygenization of the Earth's atmosphere caused them to just go. And so they experience Earth, and they're part of that own part of the Earth. And if you put all the souls together and slap it together, it makes the Earth so that we have somewhere to experience that on. And the same with putting all the planets together and all the lives that have been on all the planets and the moons and the rocks in between. If you took all that consciousness, it would create the sun, which would be a central place for all the planets to go around, so we have somewhere to experience. A lot of people see it as physicality begets consciousness or vice versa, but it's actually both. There is evolution of the physical life that's on the planets because the non-physical soul needs more to experience. And if all of it wants to experience something, what would be the best way? Is to create a planet, to create life, evolution, and to live it out. So in that way, a lot of people see human life as a projection or a matrix, a fake reality. It kind of is. It kind of is a fake place for all of us to come together and play as non-physical souls wanting to have a physical experience. When you're non-physical, you can feel more of each other. You feel at one with all these other things. So how would you experience not being a part of everything? Well, you come down and put yourself as a fractal of what you were, a bigger consciousness, and throw yourself in the body and say, wow, I'm by myself now. That's the ultimate game, the evolution, the driving behind it, from what Art and Treb have always shared with me.
It's interesting that you mentioned during that answer that you mentioned other beings that evolved on this planet and have left. And there are very few people who actually believe that. Most mainstream scientists are, wholehearted that the only, sentient beings on the planet are us. and what have you. And I think they're wrong. And I think there's a possibility for at least 3 or 4 or 5 different species to have evolved, gotten to the point of interstellar space travel, and left the planet. But I don't want to dwell on that so much, because I mean that's just it's theory, and we're here to talk about channeling and aliens. You mentioned channeling. The science fiction stuff is being channeled into like the writers and the producers in Hollywood to become sort of like mainstream science fact. And I don't disagree with you, but I don't think it's all being channeled. I got a story I've got to ask you about, see what you know about it. But just going back, using the Star Trek example again, many things on that show have become science fact. They're communicators, cell phones. Someone is right now, there's a contest, I forget which company, but there's a contest out there to invent a functional tricorder that, can read human life signs, can find, lost beings, can analyze scientific things like, soil samples and rocks samples and so on. So there's an effort to make that technology fact. The bio beds, like if you ever watch Star Trek, the old show, they had these beds. When you lay down on it, it would tell the doctor your heart rate, your gases in your bloodstream, and what have you. Vital information that they wrap a device around you to get your blood pressure. They wrap another device around your finger to get your pulse rate. This bed would tell that. We have those now. But I don't know if you had heard this story, and this is a story that I still haven't gotten the full facts on it, but a couple of people in the UFO community have heard this idea, this rumor, and have sort of verified that they heard it, but none of us have any proof. And what happened was in the first season of Star Trek, the TV show, the spaceship was controlled by a group called the United Earth Space Probe Agency, a very loosely veiled imitation of NASA. After the first season, Gene Roddenberry, they took a hiatus. Gene Roddenberry goes back to Desilu Studios on the backlots of Paramount, and he's getting ready to start writing for the next season. This is like in May, June, July, middle of the year, and they're going to start making shows for October and September, what have you. While he's there, a group of men in black type aliens, not humans, who came and identified themselves, and later I found out that they were connected with the Council of the Nine, or the what's the other name of them? It's a group of 9 alien entities who also do channeling, but they told him, hey, look, we like your show. It's pretty close, but here's the gist. And they told him about a galactic federation of some 160 alien species that controlled 80 alien species that controlled some 160 different solar systems in just this quarter of our galaxy. And if you watch the shows from season 1 to season 2, in the first generation of Star Trek, the next season, the second season, the Enterprise is now under the control of the United Federation of Planets, and they have a membership of some 60 to 80 alien species, and they control somewhere around 120 different planets. So this information was given to Gene Roddenberry from alleged aliens from the Council of Nine, or the what else they call themselves. I don't know if you had heard this story, but this was intriguing to me. I heard this back in the 70s, and every time I asked someone about it, like, oh, I've never heard of that. I've now encountered about 3 people that have said, yeah, I believe that's true. Have you heard about that? Do you know anything about that in the Council of Nine, and then that some aliens are actually either channeling or actually giving real information to Hollywood to kind of break up our prejudices against aliens and kind of bring us into their realm, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. I have never heard that story, but I completely believe that that's a case and the possibility for sure. There is galactic councils, but there's lots of them. The galaxy is huge, and 120 solar systems is not many. That's just a little tiny piece of a few hundred light years. And this is like 250,000 light years in one direction, So when it comes down to it, there is a galactic central type of council, and I don't like calling it, because there are some channelers who channel Galactic Federation of Light or something like that. Yeah. And to me, those channelings seem very disconnected from what I've understood and knew from my own channeling, so I don't really mess with that. But there are councils, there are federations, there are groups of entities that work together, and we've got some that in our local district, and we've got some in the larger galactic collective of consciousnesses and planets. But there are literally tens of thousands of different races just in the star systems that I'm aware of that work together and connect together. Sirius, all of the ones that you hear about aliens coming from there, usually it's correct. Even some of the less heard of, like Betelgeuse, Rigel, Theta Turinians have reptilians that live there, but they're not connected to their own council, but they're with other reptilian races. So, yeah, there's a lot of that goes on. And a lot of it's brought through channeling or through direct communication. Physical, I'm not very big on that because I don't know much about that. My experience is all astral projected. It's all through channeling and psychic communication in that way. So that's been my experience. I've never had a physical face-to-face meeting that I've been aware of or that I hold a memory of. But I know people who have, and through the channeling has been confirmed that they have. So I know it exists. I know it happens. When that happens, they want to bring a better perspective because humans genetically, we carry our ancestral DNA through epigenetics and we fear ETs. And that's partially because the first DNA manipulation that took place for humans back, when the Anunnaki came around and they first messed with DNA of humans, there was a fear of them because they were gods. Their technology was so fierce, and some of them were assholes to humans and mistreated them and things like that. So that trauma exists. But also, people who don't understand that there could be planets back in the 30s and 40s started making these horrific stories about people coming down to invade. And yeah, and of course there is that too. There are negative entities and beings that are extraterrestrials. And a lot of people say, well, ETs can't be malevolent beings. Otherwise, they would have never made it out of their own solar system. Well, that's not true either. You can have evil minds still be brilliant and still connect to that technology. But yeah, for the most part, the benevolent races are trying to work with humans to help them open up for that experience because the quarantine of Earth, the direct landings and meetings, that's prevented because they perceive our human race as one energy. They have to in order to make contact. And with the strife that we have with our own selves, let alone what would happen to our mental states and emotional states if these entities just come down land and say, hey, we're your neighbors. People aren't ready for that yet, but they're trying to create that energy to be ready so that once we are able to live amongst ourselves and be peaceful with each other and loving to each other and stop fighting each other for religions and politics and all the things that we still fight for, money being the biggest one. Once that system breaks down and we actually learn to live with ourselves, or the minds and hearts are ready for help from our neighbors, that's when they'll give the green flag, to go and land and do it. But the races that deal with Earth specifically, there are malevolent and benevolent forces that work, and the benevolent ones, they just don't want anyone interacting with Earth, and they try to prevent it as much as possible. And this is why you see the deactivation of nuclear weapons from ET crafts and all those things, because they want to give us a chance to grow up. Now, some races look at us and they feel bad for us because we were manipulated several times with our DNA. From very start, we were given different races' DNAs. That's another reason why the spectrum that I was talking about earlier is so wide, because there's 12 different DNAs from 7 different races, 5 of those being 50% hybrids, 2 of them being full race of their own selves. So that's 12 different DNAs that were shared. And when humans have that energy of all the different races, that's why we're also having spectrums of very loving and very malevolent. We've got so many different things going on with our DNA that's manifesting into that craziness we see around us,
And Rob, I know you had a show after this. Were you okay ending at 30 minutes after? Is that good? Or how far did you want to go?
Yeah. Yeah, 30 minutes after is perfect. That'll give me 20 minutes to get ready for the next one.
Okay, cool. I'm definitely enjoying it. We'll definitely have to get you back on. There's a few points that I know you had talked about a little bit, and I want to ask before you have to go. One, you had said some UFOs are fake, which I definitely believe that's a possibility. I've interviewed Robert Duncan, who was a person that made some kind of technology in the government or CIA or something, used it against people to survey them or do weird electronic, targeted individual stuff. And he had brought up some things that the government can do to make it look like UFOs with ions and weird stuff. That was a creepy interview, by the way. I was like, they're going to be watching me after this. I don't know if I want to do targeted individual shows anymore. We're going to skip those in the future. But it was a good show. But anyways, it's something about heating up the ionosphere or something, and it would make them or something. And well, that was the first thing I wanted to ask you about. What did you mean by that? You just mean like weird government stuff?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things we think are UFOs are just actually satellites. A lot of people don't know what they're looking at in the sky. Some of them are high planes, some of them are military craft. But the military, from my own understanding, and the entities I deal with, they don't talk about technology publicly a lot because they also believe in our own free will to grow as we need to as an entire race. But they have said that the government's way further ahead in their technology than what they share with us. So there are a lot of the like TR-3B crafts and stuff like that. There are a lot of crafts that are out there that our government and other governments own, or even shadow governments, for lack of better things to call them, are out there and are seen. And sometimes I think the governments do psyops with people too. Where if there are certain people who are in certain positions of other governments or in communication, that they can mess with them too. We've heard a lot of senators or people in different levels of Congress in different countries come out after their political career was over and talk about their own experiences. That could be cross-government psyop type deals. So, yeah, I think that exists. I think some abductions are even kind of centralized in that government type of stuff, but they don't talk to me much about that. And it's not because they won't. It's not because they don't. It's just because I myself, knowing how the government works and how they keep everything secret, just to me, it wasn't going to resolve a lot of things for me in my own personal. My experience has been very oriented towards almost a spiritual experience, and there's no other way to explain it, just because it's such a out of this world experience that took me to a whole new level of thinking. So I think it exists, and I think it happens probably more than what we think it does, but yeah, it's definitely part of it, I think.
Is there one time I had some kind of silent craft come out, like a helicopter that made no noise, and it had a cockpit and a man that seemed like, I don't know what he was, but kind of looked like some Top Gun type stuff, like Air Force. I don't know what it was, but he waved kind of at us, and then it shot off. So it seemed like it had come out to investigate why UFOs were appearing there, but they've never spoke to me face to face or anything. Another time I had a weird $2,000 credit put on my phone bill after I said I was going to turn it off, and it was like something put it there to make sure my phone stayed on so they could keep listening. So I went on a shopping spree with that and paid land taxes and shut it off anyway with that one. So they need to do that again. I need that. But the other thing I wanted to ask you about, like, I don't know if you've ever seen John Carpenter's They Live. There are a lot of people nowadays think there's some kind of beings that think we're cattle, and they kind of, control us, and they're, in Antarctica or whatever, and they work with Nazis, there's all kinds of things. But do you think there's a race of beings that are like that are really kind of like controlling the show here and kind of look at us like that on some level? And then I know another thing you said about reptilians, the perspective on that. One time I had a reptilian experience where I seen some reptilian beings that were very weird, and they were hologram like, and I was doing psychedelics and stuff. And they reminded me, the closest thing I've seen to them later was like Mayan gods from these like oracle cards. And I was like, man, that looks kind of like weird stuff I've seen. Like they look very weird, like Mayan god kind of things. But my question is, do you think there are beings here that are really running the show that are malevolent? And what's some of your, I know all reptilians are are evil. That's like some genocidal kind of talk to say that, like what people do with other races here on Earth. So I think there's a wide variety. But what do you think about as far as beings possibly, like They Live, John, with Roddy Piper and all that weird stuff, and also maybe some perspective on reptilians?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that movie. Me and my wife had never seen it until recently. I showed it to her. But yeah, I think there is a lot of truth to that. I don't think that they run the show in the way that some humans think, like they're, that they're in positions of power running the show. Most of that's greedy human stuff. But they taught the system to the early humans to provide chaos, and what chaos brings for certain beings. Are beings who are at the end of their evolution. I talked about sixth density being like the last place of physical reality. Well, some beings who are more in alignment with malevolency, they don't see as dying off as a race and going back into that like level of leaving the physical body as something that they want to do. They want to experience their self as themselves, as their race. And perceive themselves to be extremely powerful. And some of these sixth density malevolent beings taught early humans and multiple other planets how to manipulate other humans. And part of this, like I said, majority of what drives Earth's craziness is greed. It's greed from political systems. It's greed from people who create corporations that create government power exchanges, all of these types of things. But as a system, fear, chaos, those are energies. Whether we see them or not, they're energies. And can we drive a car with fear? No. But if you have a higher dimensional experience and you have technology, you can use the level of other people's energy that they're throwing off of themselves as sort of fuel. And it's not a fuel to run technology with, but it's a fuel that they can use to circumvent their actual evolution. So instead of just leaving the incarnation system and cycle and going back into another planetary consciousness and redoing it that way, they use fear and imbalance from planets as a whole to continue their incarnation cycle because they have no internal natural energy to do it anymore. It's almost like, you see the sci-fi movies where people use fear or use like the essence of children or something like that to elongate their own life. It's like that a lot, but it's fear. So they're elongating their incarnation cycle, but they're not living longer. They're still dying, but they're able to come back as reptilian form or something, of whatever consciousness feed. With our Earth, the reptilian thing is a sore thing because that was one of the races that exist here on Earth, and also was spread to Earth by reptilians that are the most infamous, the ancient reptilian alpha draconian beings. The dinosaur age, before humans came along in this cycle, there were reptilians whose DNA was manipulated and seeded by another race, which is alpha draconians, which are highest, longest living sixth density entities that are type 2 malevolent beings. And they seeded Earth to reptilians. They wanted reptilians in the galaxy. There wasn't a bunch of reptilians in this galaxy. They wanted them so that they can use them militarily for their own, co-creation, whatever the issue or problem they wanted. They seeded a lot of systems with reptilian beings. And reptilians are a natural archetype anyway. Eventually, there would have been reptilians in our galaxy. That's why we see them as animals on Earth. I've seen reptilians in animal form, like second density. Another planet, Treb's planet, has a bunch of second density reptilian type beings. So it's a natural archetype of our galactic form, but they're using that to circumvent their own stop of life and their own system of incarnating. As far as reptilians in the galaxy, you're right. If you say all reptilians are bad, it is a form of galactic racism. I fought against that because Treb, the first entity I met, and my closest being that I'm with, is actually a human-reptilian hybrid. And his race is extremely benevolent, very loving. When I first saw him, fear obviously strikes in you. Even in astral form, it felt like my body had frozen up, like I lost my breath, just the most intense fear that you could feel. What stopped me from stopping myself from talking to this entity was the amount of love I felt. As parents, we know that our kids are the most important things. We can love our child, and there's no sense of love that you feel that's bigger or more than that. But when I met this entity, I felt love that made that feel small, that made it feel my own love for my son, like it felt insignificant and small compared to the amount of this being that I felt just coming to me. So that's what made me drop my guard and actually try to communicate with them several times after. So this experience of reptilians in our galaxy, as far as the larger picture is concerned, there is truth that more of them are aligned towards type 2, but type 2 doesn't mean bad. It just means you have the capacity to be bad. You have disconnection from yourself and from, the level of your own consciousness, all the way to extremely malevolent and extremely horrible. Most reptilians, like 85% of reptilians, are in that type 2 category. But the 15% that are type 1 that are extremely benevolent and loving, most of the reptilians in that 85% of the type 2 are leaning towards a neutral energy. They're not benevolent or malevolent. They only care about themselves or their race or the people and other races that they connect with. So it's not as big as a deal as people think it is. Humans are type 2. The kissing your child after you murder people type thing that we talked about earlier. So, yeah, the reptilian thing is really rough for me when I hear a lot of fear porn around that, because it's unfounded. It's mostly, I think, to do with our ancient ancestors having to deal with reptilians in a very negative way. Even the Anunnaki, they had draconian blood in them, as well as their Pleiadian humanoid blood too. So it ripples down from the top, I think.
My experience was similar to yours. I felt a lot of fear at first when I saw them, and then it was like they were saying positive things to me, like write and sing and I love you. And my first thought was like, oh my God, fallen angels, and they're telling me they love me. What the hell? But it was very similar. And then I felt it wasn't for their own fear, it would have been, it was weird. The one was kind of Hydra-like. It's very strange. But let Jay, you got a question? He's got about 9 minutes if you want to slip one in there at the end, tail end.
I'd like to go back to what we were just now talking about. So I've been researching UFOs and aliens since I was about 11. So it's like the mid 70s, and not like all the time, but off and on. And through my research, what I found out is that there's a lot of confusion as far as which race is good, which race is bad, or who has our best interests at heart and who has malevolent intentions towards us. And it seems to it switches around two main groups, the reptilians and the grays. Depending on whose interview you listen to, whether they were an abductee or an encounter, some say that they're good, some say that they're bad. And it keeps coming back and forth. And I finally have come to the conclusion that at least the aliens that are interacting with our government and our secret programs, and we got three of them. There's the Greys from Zeta Reticuli, the Alpha Draconians, and I don't know where the insects from, but the insectoid race, the Mantisoids. These three different beings work together with our top secret, hidden government, making, technologies that we're not aware of that we talked about earlier. What I understand about it is that in 1954 they had several meetings with Eisenhower and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. One of those meetings was actually filmed on Muroc Air Force Base, which is now Edwards Air Force Base in California. And they struck a deal. And the deal was that Eisenhower and the United States government would kind of throw a blind eye to the aliens abducting humans in the United States only, and a certain amount of cattle mutilations for their own research, in which they would in exchange give us their technology or help us with their technology and help us but not necessarily conquer the earth, but become the more dominant government on the planet. And we found out very soon, or at least Eisenhower found out very soon after this deal was struck. It's called the Greada Treaty. That he had been duped. First he found out that the amount of people they abducted was more than they had promised to. They didn't conduct their experiments only within America. It was the whole planet that they were abducting humans from, as well as cattle abductions and mutilations. And that they gave no technologies to us. And then we actually started a sort of a war with them. We had what few technologies we had. We've been actively shooting down their technology, their spacecraft and their scout craft to get the technology we were promised. So it is of my expert opinion that the reason why that the United States government, at least, is not coming to the light and saying we have encountered aliens, we've done this, we've done that with them. The reason why they're not telling us the full truth is because they made this deal basically selling out human race for a ray gun. Basically, they just sold out the entire planet to these malevolent creatures for a laser gun that they never got. And the reason why they don't want the people to know is because if the entire United States populace found out that the United States government made an illegal treaty that goes against our Constitution with these alien races, when we find this out, it's going to be a revolution. I mean, there's going to be no question in my mind that a full out civil war is going to occur. So what can you tell me about that? Have you heard about that? Do you know this? The Greada Treaty is the main story here. It started in 1954 with Eisenhower, and the reason why that the technology is being held in reserve and they're not telling us about it is because the technology, like you said, is going to change the world. It's going to destroy the money, the monetary systems worldwide. It's going to make it so that no one ever has to fear about suffering from pain, medical issues. Won't have to worry about food. Won't have to worry about paying for energy. So what do you think about that whole cluster of stuff?
Yeah, it's a big subject. From what I understand, first of all, I do know that ETs have connected with governments, more so the secret governments, probably at a later time that developed into behind-the-scene governments where most regular government officials have no clue, no idea. With putting someone in office every 4 to 6 years, it would be impossible to trust them with that secret. But I think that probably did occur. What I know about the Zeta Reticuli is that they're one race of gray humanoid beings. There's dozens of types of grays that exist, but they're not the Zeta Reticuli gray. Now, from what I understood, the Zeta Reticuli gray come from an entirely different dimension. And I'm not speaking about the dimensions we were talking about earlier, but like a parallel version of our own. And we're actually in the same place, the time-space of Earth. So, to my understanding, they're a completely future version or parallel version of humans that had let technology overrun their system and it messed up their DNA. And their DNA became where none of them could reproduce anymore. And that's why the Alpha Draconians, which have better technology than any race out there because they've lived the longest, because they're bypassing their incarnation cycle, brought them through the Matrix, which is the different parallel version of this universe itself, and brought them here because we were the closest ancestral type of beings. They were pretty much humans in their experience or in their parallel dimension. So they bring them here to take the DNA to start hybridization programs. With that, they're kind of like the reptilians' servants because they brought their whole race here to save their race. They're going to do whatever the Greys want them to do. That's why they do the biddings with the governments and that. But as far as they themselves, they seem to be pretty neutral. They don't have a lot of emotions. Their emotions were killed out of their DNA with their technology because they were trying to save themselves from their pollution, from the degradation of their ability to reproduce. They altered their DNA so much, it turned them into what they were. The planet became unusable, and that's why they had to leave. So they all came through that matrix, through the DNA. And that's how I understood that. As far as their dealings with governments, Alpha Draconians don't have to interact with our government too much. They look at us like a very primitive, worthless race. The only thing they get out of us is that fear, commotion, disconnection. But they also work with reptilians that used to come from the dinoids evolution. A lot of them during the impact, which I honestly believe was an attack from another extraterrestrial race that didn't want reptilians around, drove the ones that were becoming more evolved, the ones whose DNA was manipulated by the Alpha Draconians underground, and that's where we get the whole Earth reptilian underground base type story from is those entities. They're the ones who tend to work with the government most because dimensionally they're close enough to us where they can be physical and interact with humans. And also they benefit because they're not being seen. They're protected. They're away from humans. Humans can't mess with them. As far as the mantoids, my understanding of mantoids is that they work with other greys also, not just the Zeta Reticuli. I don't know if they work with Zeta Reticuli directly or not, but my understanding is that they're genetic masters, and there's also multiple insectoid type races, but the ones that we see, like mantoids, work with different greys who also run hybridized programs on Earth. So they're using human DNA with their own DNA, creating generation of hybrids who then also work with humans, take their DNA, reproduce their own children, and it's like several generations until they can become close enough to the original human blueprint that they were to end up creating a civilization that can thrive back at their home or wherever they put their new home. And their temporary home now is the Zeta Reticuli. And the insectoids kind of are helping them with the genetics part of it, because they're from this universe, they're from this galaxy, and they know human DNA because they studied us back when we were very primitive. Comes the ant people of our history, or the insect people of the history that dealt with Southwest region of indigenous Americans, Native American people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they had dealt with them back then long enough to know how to work with human genetics. So that's why they're helping the Greys with that. So that's my understanding. But the treaty, the deal, the secrecy, all of that makes sense from everything I understood. So I wouldn't see why that wouldn't be the case.
All right, Rob, what's your website address for everybody?
Yeah, you can go to etwhisper.com. All my stuff's there. My YouTube channel is the ET Whisper, Rob Gauthier. If you type in ET Whisper, we got hundreds of free channelings out there. You can look through them all. We want to be able to make information free, even though I do offer, like Patreon is what I'm doing tonight, and sessions. We try to keep as much free for people so that they have the information available if they want it.
Well, we appreciate it so much. I've really enjoyed it. And perhaps in March we can get you to come on. Think of someone or who you would like to channel to talk to us. And perhaps in March is one of our busiest times, listener-wise. So I'll check in with you about that if you want to come on then for sure.
Yeah, it'd be great. I think Ardip would be a good entity to channel, bring through, especially talking about some of the more detailed versions of our history and the more complex subjects. Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do that.
All right. Well, we appreciate it so much. I've really enjoyed it, and good luck with your show tonight. Thanks, man.
Hey, thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure speaking to both of you, getting to know you, loving the show, and thank you again for the opportunity to chat. We'll see you guys soon.
Yep. Take it easy.
Take care. Take care. This show is like Star Trek meets X-Files meets something.
Yeah, when are you going to issue me my phaser, man? I want a phaser.
No, that was pretty interesting info. I like to find out new stuff about my encounters so people can tell me about them and stuff. Yeah, it's interesting.
It was very enlightening, and I didn't know he had to go to another show. I was hoping he'd be here a little longer. I wanted to get into the channeling part at some point and ask him how that works. Like when you channel, are you aware of what's going on? Do you have to have someone in the room, like, log everything or record it by audio or video? So I've seen Edgar Casey do it. I've seen some other channelers on like the sci-fi shows and what have you. But I don't know. I've never seen it up close and live, so I don't know how it works. Are they aware of what's going on while they're channeling somebody?
Well, me and Christina watched the show, and JoJo might want to watch this. JoJo's a alien whisperer too, but it's called Surviving Death. And it's on Netflix, and I was shocked to see Leslie Kean in it. It's her book. The whole show's based on one of her books, and we know her from UFO situations. She has a book about all those pilots and like people that were in government official type situations, airplanes, pilots, police who have reported UFO sightings, and she compiled them all in like some book that I think became like a New York Times bestseller. So she did that show, but the show was pretty good. It was about people with afterlife experiences, and it got into the weirder mediums and stuff, and it also got into people who talked about some are frauds, so it didn't just get all gooey and stay positive about it all. But some of the mediums actually channeled on there, and it gets pretty weird. I don't know what to think about some of that stuff. But one guy would paint a picture of a deceased loved one that was in the room and then show it, and they'd know who it was, and he'd tell them more stuff and they'd start crying. So some of them seemed legit, but it was just so weird that that's a gift right there for sure if he's really doing that. But it's hard to trust that stuff too, so you don't know. But there was one in particular. I'm going to channel him right now, and this is the greatest one. Hi, my name's Tommy. How are you doing tonight, Jay? There was some lady that I've been impersonating that one since I've seen it. Hi, I'm Tommy. It was cracking me up. It was like The Conjuring. It was Annabelle talking from The Conjuring, or Chucky. Hi, I'm Chucky. Want to play? But it was pretty good. We'll get him back to channel. I didn't know what to think of him at first. We were looking on, me and Christina looked on YouTube, and he was like on a swing, and it was kind of goofy. I was like, what the hell is this? But he was pretty cool and pretty definitely intelligent and brings some new light to things. But it was just some silly commercial where people were on swings, and he was on a swing doing something weird. I don't know. But it was just something funny. But anyway, it was definitely who's coming up here next week. Tally Johnson, Ghost of the Civil War.
Oh, cool.
Of South Carolina. So it revolves around South Carolina. You ever been to South Carolina, boy?
Oh, yeah. A couple times.
You been there? I went whitewater rafting there once with the churches or something.
That I wouldn't do there. No.
I
but
went to Carolina something. I don't remember which one.
My brother went to school in Charleston, South Carolina, or not Charleston, Columbia, where the University of South Carolina is. So I went there a couple times, and my school was an art school, so it was a party school, but it wasn't like a football stadium party school. It was just low key. We had music, we had art showings, and people would get high and go to the art showings. But my brother went to this big college, Big Ten college, stadium football college, and man, I'll tell you what, they some huge drinking parties, and that's all they did. They just drank. I was like, give me some weed. I don't want to drink all weekend long.
Yeah, drinking's great, like the first 30 minutes or something. After that, it's like all downhill.
Yeah, I mean, after the third or fourth beer, the taste is gone. It tastes like water, and within a half an hour of the fourth or fifth or sixth one, that's when the hangover begins. So,
like I'm remembering puking Jaeger in Buckhead, Atlanta.
Oh.
Outside a bar. It's horrible. But yeah, it's good sometimes, but weed's the way to go, bro. That's right. But JoJo's definitely an alien whisperer.
Yeah.
I'll have to ask Rob if he knows any other people that want to come on the show. I've learned that's a good way to get people scheduled during COVID. You ask other people if they know other people, and then they know other people, then you get other people on. That's worked a lot. Facebook statuses have worked a lot. Got some really interesting people just putting up a Facebook status. So COVID's been weird with all this. So, like, I don't even really get any books hardly anymore. Occasionally, I mean, I get some, but not like I used to. They used to back a truck up and give me books. Now you're lucky to get 3 or 4. Have you got any books lately?
I haven't. No. I bought 2 books, but they weren't for the show. They were. I bought Ready Player One, Ready Player Two. Ready Player Two is a sequel, which just came out like November last year.
I know that book. They made a movie about it. Spielberg made Ready Player.
Yeah, Ready Player, and they're probably going to do the second one too. But yeah, I bought the book. So the book is a little different than what we saw in the movie, but the movie was really good. So I was like, well, maybe I better get the book and read it too, because. So with Dune, I wanted to see Dune first before I read the book, because the book's like, it's like a Bible. So I saw the movie, and then I read the book, and the book was actually better, but the movie it was close. They had to cut out a lot of stuff out of the book because there's just so much. There's so many different plots in the book Dune that you couldn't, if you were to make, what's his name that made it, David Lynch. He said if I wanted to do this correctly, it would be a 60-hour movie.
Yeah,
you just can't put that in the movie theaters. Who's who's going to go and see a movie, you know, 30 different 2-hour showings. It just would never happen. So
I'm wondering how they're going to do the new Dune coming out.
I'm interested in looking at that too. I think it should already be out, but I saw this thing on Netflix or one of the streaming things called Jodorowsky's Dune, and Jodorowsky, yeah, he's like this weird, wacky.
He was going to do it, but it fell through or something.
He spent a lot of time on it in the early beginning. He brought in Mobius, you know, Jean Giraud, the French stylistic painter. He brought in H.R. Giger, and almost all the people who did the preliminary backgrounds. Some of them actually went over to David Lynch when he started doing it. And before they even got to David Lynch, when they started filming it, they'd already gone through 5 other directors before David Lynch came in and finalized it. But most of the stuff that Mobius and Giger did with Jodorowsky found its way into the David Lynch Dune. But the way that Jodorowsky was going to do it was going to be wacky. And he was going to do a 20-hour movie.
I've seen some of that guy's movies. It's pretty weird, but I like the David Lynch one, but I hope this one does well. I just hope this one's not really good and then flux at the box office, like boss office. I can't talk tonight. Box office, like Blade Runner did. You know, the new Blade Runner was really good, but flopped at the box office. That's so sad.
A lot of movies that are good flop at the box office, and then they don't do well in the Oscars. And what I hope it does well too, but what I don't like about this one is that he's gender swapped a couple of characters already, which I don't necessarily agree with. You know, when
gender swapping, what's that gender swapping?
Gender and race swapping. And like, okay, the best example is the Battlestar Galactica. When they redid Battlestar Galactica, they took Boomer. He was an African American dude. He was a fighter pilot. When he goes into the new show, he's now an Asian female, and then you find out that she's, you know, an alien. She's a Cylon. You know, she's a female mechanical Cylon. They took Starbuck, who was a cigar-smoking, beer-swilling, womanizing male fighter pilot, is now a beer-swilling, cigar-smoking female manonizer. So that kind of stuff, gender swapping and race swapping, I don't agree with it, especially when the book establishes the person's race and sex. It should be that way when you redo the movie. Just because you're the director and you have creative, you know, license or whatever, you want to change it, that can be the killing of. So I think if he does too much of that, and I only know of one character, Liet Kynes is supposed to be a man. She's a female in this one.
Who's the Sting character? That's like the son of Harkonnen, the villains. The Sting, when Sting was in the David Lynch movie, he was like the evil Harkonnen dude. Yeah, who's going to be that dude in the new one? I wonder.
Yeah, I don't know who Fate Ralph is in the new movie. And the only thing that I know for a fact is that in the book, Liet Kynes is the Emperor's planetologist. He's not native to Dune, but he becomes the Fremen leader, and nobody knows that until you get to the end of the book. His daughter is Chani, who marries Paul Muad'Dib, who becomes the Messiah. And Fate Ralpha he's just a genetically modified kid who, I mean, he's like 19 or 17, and Paul is 15 throughout the book. He cheats when he fights. He uses poison, and Paul uses his own strengths and abilities. So if he puts all that kind of stuff in there, I don't know. We'll have to see. If he keeps most of the book intact, it should be okay. But who's Fade Ralph? I don't know. I don't even think his cousin Glausu Raban, the beast Raban, is in this one. I looked at some of the stuff on IMDb, and those names just don't show up. So I don't know.
I'm guessing this new one is gonna be made so there'll be more of them, maybe, or end in such a way like Empire Strikes Back situation or something. I don't know, but
there are 6 original books from Frank Herbert. So
yeah, there's a long way to go.
Yeah,
and a short way to get there. Well, hopefully it does good. But did they push it to next year? I know HBO Max is going to have all these movies on there. It's supposed to be coming to HBO Max, and you just watch it on there. They did it with Wonder Woman. I haven't watched the new Wonder Woman, but I know they did that. They're just putting them on there now, and you just watch them off that.
Yeah, because of the COVID thing, because only certain theaters are actually accepting physical, attendance.
Now we have a deeper question for Jay.
October 1st.
Who will be president on the 20th of January. Will Biden be inaugurated, or is Trumpelgooch still secret president?
What's going to happen on the 20th is one of two things. Either it's going to be Biden, and then the whole thing explodes, and we'll have Kamala Harris, or it's going to go over without a hitch, and it's going to be Biden. So one way or another, it's going to be Biden. How long is he going to remain president? I don't know. But what happened at the mall or the Congress the other day, last week, there is a possibility for violence. So who knows? Maybe they blow up.
I have seen the craziest right-wing news that I've ever seen, and I'm not going to say where at. I'll say it privately, but I'm sure it's at plenty of right-wing type sites. But basically, it's saying that the inauguration has been canceled and Trumpelgooch is still going to be president. And there are people that believe this stuff. It's such a like lies. Like, it's crazy. It's like there's parallel realities happening. It's really weird. It's like a Twilight Zone episode. But I mean, there's news and people. It's very popular news. They believe it. It's like they believe it, that he's somehow going to still be president or whatever. And, who knows? They're warning about the 17th. The FBI has put out warnings about rallies, at right-wing rallies, that there could be extremism and stuff like that. And then, of course, the big date is the 20th. Something's supposed to happen or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I saw this crazy Trumpelgooch commercial from Parler. And I'll have to ask Wham about it because I'm not going to go into detail, but she showed it to me. And basically it was worthy enough that the authorities would probably want to see it. And they were passing it around. And it was Trump talking. It was basically saying, suit up into the armor of God. And I swear, man, it reminded me of a commercial for that movie, The Purge. Oh, wow. It was really weird. Like, it was creepy. Like, there's got to be a revolution and put on the armor of God and the crusade. I mean, it was like watching Purge, Trumpelgooch version. Like, it was really creepy. But there's some weird stuff going on. No doubt about that. That's just crazy.
Because of what happened at Congress last week, I went and I loaded every weapon that I have and hid them in strategic areas throughout the house so that if something goes down, I live out in the sticks, so I don't expect anything. But it's better to have it ready and not need it. Have it and not need it. And be not ready.
Another question: are you a QAnon shaman?
A what? A QAnon what?
A QAnon shaman. That dude that was dressed like a buffalo.
Oh, no. I am absolutely 100% nonconformist. I don't join groups. Like that kid. Kid in the movie Ready Player One, I don't clan up. I am 100% unaffiliated.
That's crazy. I tell people, left versus right, GOP versus DNC, whatever. It's like Jim Jones versus Waco at this point. It's like either side, someone's gonna die and drink the Kool-Aid. Either way, which way you look at it, both sides are crazy as hell. So
yeah.
Just give you my $2,000 stimulus. My $2,000 stimulus. Do me. Biden at least give you $2,000. No, Trumpelgooch tried to give it to us, but that little McConnell Satan stopped it. Mm-hmm. But Trumpelgooch probably knew they weren't going to do it anyway. It was like a weird thing, but I don't know. But anywho,
Biden's saying he's going to do the $1,400. Another one coming up as soon as he gets in there. But how much can you believe a Democrat? No more than you can a Republican. Just like you said, man, it's half a dozen in one hand and 6 in the other.
How bad is it when you compare both political parties to cults? I mean, that really is culty. It's cult-like. It's tribalism, and it's really it's the same thing with the Civil War and all that North versus South, all that crazy people fighting over directions, who sticks bigger, and it's gonna kill us all. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what it's come boiling down to right now, is the death of America, it seems like.
I was actually thinking about this today. It's like a sort of a social experiment. What would happen if you took you got two cities that you completely empty out two cities, and then you put in one city, you fill it to its capacity with everybody who thinks the same, has the same, likes and dislikes, hobbies, etc. They think the same politically, religiously, etc. Then you take another city with the same capacity, and you empty it out and you fill it with people half and half. Some people that think one way and some people that think the other way. like red and blue, like Democrat and Republican. Which city do you think would thrive? And I'm thinking the city where everyone has similar ideas and philosophies and moral compass would thrive better than the one with the bipartisan views, because eventually one side is going to overpower the other. When you have a city of all people with the same values, well, they're going to take those values, they're going to translate them down to their children and their children to their children and those children to their children. You have a society that's bifurcated down the middle. You got two different groups. One thinks one way, one thinks the other way. Eventually, one of those groups is going to outbreed the other and take over, and it's going to turn into what we're seeing now: strife and possible civil war and fighting and all kinds of, just like you saying, craziness.
And then, what's the Earth going to do? When's the last time it shifted plates? Why hasn't it done it again? God, hopefully, stopping it or something. I don't know, but it seems like it could happen. There's a lot of crazy, earthquakes and stuff going on as per the usual. And then, of course, all the UFO files are just released. I haven't even looked at that stuff, but it's probably just regurgitated vomit, probably for the most part. But
yeah, you told me that. I haven't looked either, but yeah,
heard about it.
What I said back was, wow, that the CIA dropped all of their stuff onto the internet. That's freaky, wow, cool. But are you right? Is it just the same old stuff we've already heard about? There's nothing new, no good photos and what have you. Is it just regurgitated old material? Who knows? But
I saw today that the Duplass brothers, they did Stranger Things. They're making a Bigfoot documentary series on Hulu. So that's pretty interesting that they would, do that. It's pretty interesting. I've seen some. I meant to ask him about Bigfoot. Damn it.
Yeah.
I didn't. We'll have him back in March. You already know where he's leaning, so I'm sure he probably thinks Bigfoot's ethereal.
Yeah, he might think so. Yeah. Well,
that's what I think.
There is that one creature that's in the Book of Aliens that looks like Chewbacca or Bigfoot. That is an actual
Book of Aliens. You got the MUFON almanac from the.
No, I've got it in my Amazon.
I bought it. I haven't got it yet, but I bought it.
Yeah, I'm gonna get it. I need to also get the. There's two other alien.
Believe I bought a MUFON book. I was throw up.
Well,
I mostly did it to laugh at it, but there may be good stuff in it. There's some race called Sagittarians. Is there a Capricorn race too, and an Aquarius race, and an Aries race? Like, there's probably stuff I'll be laughing about too in there.
I think what you're gonna find, and I don't think I'm gonna find it too when I get that book. It looks like a regurgitation of what's out of the Russian alien book and the Blue Planet Project alien book, which are both allegedly have been.
That Gil Carlson is the guy, I think, who does that Blue Planet. He comes to Before It's News and spams that thing, trying to sell it all over in the comment sections.
No, I didn't know that, but it looks like a good book. It looks like a good read. But allegedly, he got a hold of that information from a Hispanic doctor who smuggled it out of Area 51, Area S4, or something like that. And then there's another one that's exactly very similar, but it came out of the Russian side of things. And he does both of them. He makes both books. And it's like a spiral bound kind of self-published thing. They look very similar. They have the same information almost directly parallel, not necessarily word for word, but what they have in those two books looks exactly like what's in that MUFON book, like word for word.
You ever had Starburst gum? It's pretty good.
No, I haven't.
Gum.
Channel me some of that, will you?
Starburst gum. Pretty good. Lemon.
I'll have to get some of that. It looks good.
Yeah, it's good. We're going to watch WandaVision hopefully in a bit and check it out, hopefully. It's got one of those Olsen twins in it. They look like...
No, she's not one of the twins. She's one of the younger. She's younger than the twins. She's the third or fourth kid, but she's also way hotter than the twins.
Yeah, I thought it was one.
Did Jay just say he had 4 kids? Wait, what did I miss here?
No, the girl who plays in WandaVision is not one of the Olsen twins. She's the younger sister. She's like the third or fourth of those kids.
Oh, and you're gonna have 4 kids with her? Is that what you're telling me?
I can try.
I'm just asking, man.
Jay watches Full House rerun.
She is really pretty, so I mean, and I don't usually go after blondes, and she is blonde.
Oh, blondes. Blondes are scary, man.
Well, you know what George Carlin said about blondes? He said blondes have more fun. They also, unfortunately, have more VP.
Yeah.
What?
Wait, Jerry. I thought you said
Carlin.
Jeffrey was married a blonde. Wait, what am I missing here? I'm missing out on some stuff,
Christina
man.
has black hair. Or red.
Oh, black hair, black or red hair. You better make your mind. What is she, blonde, black hair, red?
Little bit of both.
You
Little bit of
confused.
Me and Jeff both have blonde hair. See?
Mhm.
Jeffrey's confused, man. Oh, we all three.
You ever met the ET Whisperer? He's pretty cool. He's got a channel next show.
Oh my God! I'll be sure not to listen to that.
He's pretty intelligent.
I heard
I
part
didn't
of.
know what to think.
I heard him for a few minutes. I said I got to go. I'm going to another room. I'll have to call into Jeffrey's show. If not, so I'm leaving.
You can call in one of these channels. I'll get it. You're an alien
Oh my
whisperer.
God!
Don't be starting no gang wars. Come on
Right.
now.
Yeah.
Alien whisperer.
Yeah.
But who you got on tonight?
Last Chandler. Oh wait, last Chandler I did Jesus or something. I was like, really? You channeling Jesus? Oh, I said I'm not coming to that show. They're like, why? I said because I want to fit Jesus. So we're gonna do
Channeling
something else.
Jesus.
We've had some
Sure,
crazy
that's true.
stuff.
Hi, I'm
Quite a few
Jesus.
channels
Good to
on
be
over
here
the years.
tonight.
We've had one that channel. We had ones that channel what your dogs think. I'm like, really? I said, my dog think you crazy because he's crazy. So what else would you think?
That Leslie Keane has that whole Surviving Death Netflix show now. It's
Oh.
pretty good. It had channels on there, but that was kind of goofy. You laugh about it, probably.
What's it
Yeah,
called?
yeah.
Surviving Death.
Okay. It's on
She's in
Netflix.
it.
Yeah,
Bud
see that
Hopkins.
she
Bud
proves my point. Everybody who's ever got in any of these fields, the only really thing they're looking for is fame. So they'll do whatever it is that keeps them relevant into the light.
Fame. I'm
Yeah,
gonna live forever.
Me and Jeffrey
I'm
aren't
gonna
looking for
learn.
fame, but we're pretty famous on your station, though, aren't we?
y'all did pretty good. Y'all lately been running in the 350s to 390 range, hovering right around
I
400.
try not to go around saying I'm famous. Brad Pitt's famous. I'm not famous.
Yeah. Well, Keanu Reeves, tried to kiss me at a party one time. So I guess.
Keanu Reeves. What?
Yeah. Oh, you didn't hear about that? Oh man, I thought y'all knew about that. Oh, I have to tell you a
I
story
didn't
about
know
that.
about your gay affair with
Hey,
Keanu.
no. Let's calm down now, Jeffrey. I know where you live, buddy. Don't make me put a hit on your ass. No, he was like drunk. I got long hair on my ass. He's like, oh yeah, hey baby, yeah. Putting his hand. I had turned. I looked at him, and then I see that big old beard face. He was like, oh my god.
Oh, he thought you were a girl.
Yeah.
I don't know how you get mistake.
Ted.
Even with long hair, I don't know how you get mistake me for a girl. I'm just an ugly, what? I'm just thinking you gotta be a really
It's
good
getting
girl.
weird. Bill and Ted, baby. And JoJo.
Bill and Ted and JoJo's weird experience.
Needless to say, they paid me to keep the video offline. So I was like, hey, well, that's a lot of famous people. A lot of famous people come to one. And if you've got friends at a couple of clubs, it's like 3 or 4 clubs they're gonna always go to, whoever it is. They're always going to go to these clubs, and if you can get in the back, you're always going to get to meet people. It's just part of the cityscape, and not as much this year because unfortunately, COVID is probing everybody. But other than that, it's been kind of interesting.
Who you got
Jay
on?
has been probed.
Actually, I'm probing Netflix for Surviving Death right now. Put it in my watch list.
And now, so one of my regulars writes into me, chews me out for watching Netflix. Right now, I'm not actually watching. I am paying for it, but I'm not actually watching it because I don't. Lately, there's nothing really on there I wanted to watch. But they chew me. I know you got Tubi. You got Tubi. It's free. I'm like, yeah, it's free. And Tubi's got a lot of good stuff on it, but it don't got everything Netflix going. It's just like Amazon don't have everything. I mean, everybody's got a little bit of difference. And really, truly, somebody was bitching them because I paid for about 4 of these things. Probably cost me $60 a month. I used to pay $400 a month for cable when I lived in New Orleans, and even up here, I was paying $250 for it. I got 10 times as much shit to watch now as I ever had. And then I decided if I went local, I wouldn't put an antenna up on my house. So I get like 65 local channels from Baton Rouge, Louisiana to Pensacola, Florida, man. I seen Jeffrey on TV just the other day with some.
Y'all got one of those dudes that do we got that Spinguli that wears that hat and he dresses weird and does like shows, weird movies, like dinosaur weird stuff. and he's like one of those hosts, a TV host, but weird, like Elvira or something. But it's a dude. We have him here. His name's like Sven Gooley. But you know what I'm talking about. Is there one in New Orleans, like on y'all's TV, a weird host or something? Like, you know what I'm talking about? Like
I don't know. They used to be. I don't know if there is anymore. But New Orleans goes through different flavors of host. I know what's his name died. Morgus the Magnificent. He was just but he was just a
Those
parent.
are cool though. I like those guys.
Yeah, he's Morgus the Magnificent. They would do horror runs and flicks and stuff like that, and then he would have his lab with Chopsley, his big demon guy that walked around, and he'd be doing shit between the commercials, and he was
I have to look him up. I haven't heard of him.
Frankly, when I was a kid, if I remember, when I was a kid, I think he scared the living shit out of me. Looking back on it, I think he did actually. I kind of faintly remember that. I'm getting kind of old now, so it's hard to remember back that far. But I think he might have. It's funny as hell when you watch it today. But it's he's been around. Him and like that Binkies, whatever they called them, the little fairy thing for Christmas. Weird shit like that's been hanging around forever. Part of department stores and stuff like that. Maison Blanche used to put on these big, huge Christmas. You don't even see that down here anymore. If you want to go see a huge Christmas display, you got to go to Beau Rivage Casino, and they do the Coca-Cola Bear Christmas. They put on Austin's Christmas display. You'll be walking through, the wolves will be looking at you while you're walking through, and they'll smile at you and shit, and bears will be in there, and there's snow everywhere. It's really well done. I posted a few years in a row. I didn't go this year. I didn't get to go, and I didn't go to Lakeview, which is always gorgeous. They put trees in their front yards, light up everything. It's a nice time, man.
I found Morgus the Magnificent on Wikipedia.
No, you found? Yeah, I didn't think it'd be that hard to find. He's been around. He was around for a long time.
He croaked.
Yeah, it's just an old, gross old.
He looks like a Hunchback of Notre Dame or something.
Yeah, he does. And then he got Chopsley. And there's a couple other characters that was involved in it. And he was always brewing something up in his damn lab in between the commercial breaks and shit. And it's just fun to watch when you were watching whatever you were watching, like the mummies. And remember the old mummy, the old rap mummy. You Z Jenners just go to sleep. Y'all have no idea what we're talking about. the what? Yeah, when y'all think of the mummy, you think of what's his name, and you think that's old. What's the good looking guy's name in the last three mummies?
Brendan Fraser.
Yeah, he's a good actor. Well, he's a good mummy actor anyway, and he's a lot of fun to watch. But it's not like the old.
Definitely.
He's in a good show now called Doom Patrol. It's on HBO Max in the DC section because it's on DC streaming, but you can find it on HBO Max. But it's he plays a robot, and it's this weird superhero show based on a DC comic, Doom Patrol. Timothy Dalton's in it, him, and it's really crazy as hell. But it's called Doom, DOOM.
I'll have to take a look at it. Yeah, I got HBO Max. I think I got rid of HBO.
Look in the DC section, but it should pull up just with a search Doom Patrol, 2 words.
Yeah, between the Amazons and HBOs and all we got, and the Hulu and the Netflix and a couple other ones we have, and then I got Vizzo and Roku. I mean, Jesus, this TV out the freaking yin yang, man. I mean, Lord, if you can't find what you want to look at, and somehow or another, I ended up like 5 different sets of free channels that are live streaming channels. So I've got like 260, local, not just local, but other local from other places in the country and around the planet. I'm like, man,
Shudder's really good. SHUDDER. It's just horror. It's got crazy.
Because it is nice to watch live TV.
Yeah.
From time
who
to time.
You got coming up next? You can't be.
We are actually. I am off tonight. The show. It's going to be Science and Beyond's up, and it's going to be. Oh hell! I just had it in front of me. That's what happened when you get old, man. You should remember these things, and it just goes away. We're doing. The Science of UFOs tonight. Actually, is what we're doing.
Cool. All right. Well, we'll see you next Friday. I got Ghost of South Carolina Civil War.
We've got the New York 7 strippers coming on next week. Man, these girls are famous and
New York strippers. You're interviewing New York strippers.
7 of them, man. They all have science degrees. So we're going to talk about their science and their job.
The science of pole dancing.
Yeah, the science of keeping bald-headed men happy.
I got a good story for you, Joe, before we go. there's this really famous strip club down in DC called Good Guys, and I watched this place go from 1 stage to 2 stages to 3 stages. And what the girls did there is they have a brass bar that goes around the stage. It's just a stage for 1 girl each, so there's three girls on stage at any one time. But they have a bar on the ceiling, and then of course the pole. And the girls there invented this thing called the Flying V. So they grabbed the bar